Welcome back, everyone, to Healing Connection. I'm Joy McBride, and today we're diving into a topic that affects all of us: financial wellness. Money stress can compound PTSD, anxiety, and depression. So, to help us navigate this, I am joined by Justin Ford, a certified financial counselor who guided hundreds of families towards stability and hope. Justin, welcome. Tell us briefly about your journey into financial counseling and why you're passionate about serving veterans, first responders, and their families.
Well, as dumb as it sounds, I actually got into finance because of how much I hate it. Where I come from, I think some of my family, but
Yes.
a lot of them are entrepreneurs, and so we have learned life and the hard lessons taught there, but we were never taught finance. And that's been something that I've watched my family struggle with for, at this point, decades. I've always set out to determine to do better for myself, and I hate people trying to take advantage of me, and I hate when others, do get taken advantage of. So I decided to use those skills where I could best help people. I went through, got all my licenses, spent 5+ years, studying lawsuits at the SEC and everything else like that to really learn how the financial world, not even just our nation and stuff, but the financial world works, and it's all interconnected. So but yeah, as a Marine Corps veteran, I love working with fellow veterans, and it's just, changing people's lives, literally helping make people and families millionaires, or at least getting to the point where they are financially stable, not having to worry about bills, making sure all their stuff is actually aligned with where they're going.
Awesome. Well, let's start with the struggles everyone has. What do you think are the top three financial challenges you see in the community?
Money, money, and money. No, in all seriousness, we actually just crossed $18 trillion in consumer debt. So that is
Wow.
not national debt. That is only consumers alone. So that's going to be credit cards, mortgages, auto, student loans, all of that stuff. So more and more, Americans are struggling to find even $1,000 in something like an emergency fund. Most families I meet with, unfortunately, don't have extra cash to spend. They keep going underwater. Then you have to come and rely on debts. So credit cards. You might be familiar with a semi-famous man named Albert Einstein. I love, yeah, obviously, but I
Yeah.
love several of his quotes. I mean, yeah, he was a genius, but he talks about compound interest a few times. One of them, he goes on to say that either if you understand compound interest, you earn it, which has been typically exclusively to the rich because they're born into those families, they get that education early on, and they keep repeating it generation, and grows. Whereas, people like us, we're not taught that. And guess again, it keeps repeating. So that
Right.
cycle of ignorance continues, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. So, all these different things, they pile on. That in itself compounds struggles, and it gets people deeper and deeper into water. So yeah, I would say just the lack of money. We haven't had a federal update to the minimum wage, even though cost of living has risen exponentially in the past 30 years plus. People are going more and more into debts, relying more and more on credit cards, which just it exacerbates that credit trap, that debt cycle, and it's hard to get out of. It's just, all of that, especially in the veterans, because all the things we experience that most civilians thankfully never have to go to, it piles on stress, combined with PTSD and depression and anxiety, and it's not a good combination. So yeah, that's unfortunately where a lot of people are right now, and there's not enough of me to go around. It's all about education. That it's always comes back to education.
I can honestly say, from a personal standpoint of view, I fully understand. And to be honest with you, for you listeners out there, Mr. Ford is helping me personally try to get back on track that we are supposed to be, instead of trying to dig our way out from an endless pit. So how can somebody refrain money from a source of stress into a tool for security?
So what we teach is something called the financial house. At its base, what we try to do, think of like Bob the Builder or a handyman out there, okay? So all these things are very stressful, especially when you don't have it. So, kind of taking into psychology and stuff around that, and just simply shifting perspective from a negative outlook to a positive outlook has tremendous positive effects long term. But with the financial house, we teach the different steps that people typically go towards. So, like income protection is the base. If I were to die, my income stops. My family now has to pick up that slack. So I need to make sure to cover myself for the here and now. And then on that, emergency fund access, cash in the bank. You typically want to have 3, 6 months emergency fund. Getting out of debts. That debt cycle, that debt trap keeps pulling you back under. It's like quicksand. When your debts have more interest than what your investments are earning, then it just keeps pulling you back under. So until you get out of that, it's hard to move up. But then you start investing. Investing is always at least a 25-year outlook, not playing it trying to time the markets and everything else like that. It's not feasible. It never has been, never will be. And then you work on, after you get that stuff set, the basics, the stuff you absolutely have to get, then you can start worrying about planning for goals and dreams and, start living your life again. But unfortunately, where we are as a society, too many people are stuck too long in this one place that it's stressful, it's depressing unless you have the exact way figured out. And then so that's what we go through and teach. And I did the presentation and everything that you saw where I brought up that house, and that's pretty much it. It's once you get those areas locked down, everything starts aligning and then working together, and then it
Right.
starts growing and building and keep going and growing and growing and compounding, and then all of a sudden you look back, it's 20 years down the road, and oh dang, I have $1 million in my retirement. Okay, it took a little bit, but life is starting to really pick back up again. So, and it just depends on where that individual's at or where that family's at, but everyone's in a different place, so it's just meeting them best as possible and helping them get from point A to point B as quick as possible.
Okay. Good. Now, we all know that budgeting can feel daunting. What tools or methods do you recommend for someone who's never budgeted before?
Keep it simple. Go online, go to your app store. You can go to Intuit. They have a bunch that, especially like free tiers that connect with your bank. So it's already secure. You have $1 billion company supporting the infrastructure. Don't go crazy. Just keep it simple. When you are aware of where your money's going and you actively try to discipline yourself,
Right.
too many people, it's where we are as a society. Unfortunately, it is kind of depressing. So a lot of people fall into that trap of that temporary gratification. Buying something, you get that little hit of that feel good. Once you shift that perspective to the long-term outlook, that's when it might not be as quick, but that's when things really start coming into play. But yeah,
Okay. Now, for my listeners out there, what I would like for you to do is pause and pick one category, like groceries or gas, and assign it to an envelope or an app category when you get a chance. That single step locks in accountability. Now we're going to go on to debt management and building savings. As before, debt can feel insurmountable. What strategies do you teach people for tracking it?
so what we do, we actually have specialized tools. A lot of people might be familiar with Dave Ramsey, debt snowball. Same concept. You don't want to take out predatory loans because those, I mean, they are as close to being evil as you can get to being evil. You should not pay 30% interest to have a loan to help you stay afloat. Like, please don't do that. But
Yeah,
debt stacking, all it is a mathematical prioritization of how to pay off your debts. And then with it, you're utilizing compound interest in a positive way to get those debts paid off in a quicker and quicker manner. Hopefully that makes sense without showing an example, but like I was working with a client the other day who had almost $200,000 in debts, between their mortgage, their credit cards, their auto, some student loans and everything. And then instead of 70 years of paying it down with, I think it was like 500,000 or something close to that interest they would have paid over all that, they will now be completely out of debt in 13 years total. They're still paying
holy
the
cow.
minimums. Yeah, they're still paying the minimums, but it's a discipline that they have to follow because it is, I mean, it's just math. You can argue with math, but you're going to be wrong. So it's just math on how it's prioritized. And then as they're paying it down and you're following this, it's going to get bigger and bigger. Their debts are going to disappear quicker and quicker, which saves money on interest owed because you're not paying that long term. You're paying them down very, very quick. That helps raise your credit score. You have a higher debt to income ratio, which is good for that's what mortgages look at when or mortgage companies, when you're buying a house, they look at your debt to income ratio. So the less debt you have and the greater income, then the more likely you are going to get better rates across anything, whether it's credit cards, personal loans, vehicle loans, mortgages, all that stuff. So it does, everything works together as a whole. But with, I try to give very actionable steps when I'm teaching these things, but with like the individual, like you said, the envelope, a little old school for my liking, but it works. Dave Ramsey taught that for a reason because it does work. It gets you thinking in a conscious manner of, okay, hey, here's my budget. I can't go over that. That's my cash in the envelope. Once I'm out, I'm out. So that is still very good if people are very hands-on and they don't have the control to not swipe their card. But yes, small actionable steps like that, just to even get you thinking about it, is tremendously helpful long term.
And yeah, I can even contest to some of that because we just had a major hit because we had to repair the vehicle, one of our vehicles, and that took a chunk of my money. And now that I have to play catch up because of that, and it is not the easiest thing, but it doesn't mean that I'm giving up. It just means that I'm going to try a little bit harder and see how much further I can get over the next couple of months, which I'm hoping within a month, month and a half, I'm caught up to what I need to where I was before that. So when we talk about savings, how do you encourage people to actually build a emergency fund?
Pay yourself first.
Okay.
It's I try to connect with people on their level. And so I don't really have like a go-to of like, hey, do this and you'll get this. It's more of everyone has something different they're going for in life. So everyone's in a different place, everyone has a different story. So the emergency fund, I mean, that is what it's for. You want at least 3 6 months of cost of living because stuff happens. You never know what's going to happen in your day. You can get in a car wreck, somebody can throw a rock somewhere and it hits your car, you have to get it fixed, something like that. And if you don't have that, well, then you're going into debt or you're not paying it. So quality of life decreases. So it's really about prioritizing. I don't know why that word's so hard right now, but prioritizing where your money is going because you have a limited amount. We're not Jeff Bezos and everything. So you have to still be conscientious of what you're spending it on. But if you pay yourself first, whether that's in investments, your emergency fund, different things, paying down your debt, again, it goes back to more of that long-term outlook. But even still, you have money in the bank, it's less stressful. You have an emergency fund. You know that if something happens, you at least have 5, 10, $15,000 to fall back on while it's still building, albeit slower than like an investment, but you have that into, let's say, a money market. Most money markets are still doing about 4% right now, not quite catching up with inflation, but at least better than in just a bank that gives you 0.01%. So it's
Right.
peace of mind. It's financially a foundation for you in case something happens, but it does help a lot psychologically and emotionally knowing you have that. So it's really about shifting that mind frame of, okay, well, instead of those, ordering on Amazon or buying 20 coffees in a month, like, hey, just you don't have to sacrifice everything. Just simply cut back a little bit and then pay yourself that extra. That makes sense?
It does. And I think a lot of people don't understand the concept when it comes to that you don't have to necessarily stop what you do every day just to save a penny. You instead you can still maybe get your 20 coffees, but instead of a large, let's maybe go down to a medium, or we do cut back from 20 to let's go to 10, and then those 10 we could probably get a large or a medium. It's what it's how disciplined we've got to make ourselves. Now we're going to move on to positive financial habits and communication. Let's talk about family or partner communication. How do we talk about money without turning it into a fight?
That's a hard one. So I always try to meet with, if couples are together, I always try to meet with both to get them to see what it is I'm teaching and for them to be on the same page. So from my point of view, I try to help bring them both in at the same time so they can both learn and have that journey together. Something I've always prioritized ever since early on when we first got married was open communication. And that has involved around finance and different things as well. I don't know how to get people to communicate better apart from just showing an example and just telling them, the reasons why they should. I mean, people are people, so they're going to do what they're going to do. But if you are willing to let yourself be open and talk about money, talk about the struggles, you are not alone. There's 8 billion people out there. You are not alone. I know it feels like it sometimes, and those dark times come in different things, and it doesn't feel like there's anything out there for us. But there's a difference between feeling and knowing. Okay, so there's a difference between opinion and truth. You have to know that another person is going through the same thing. And if you have a significant other there with you, they're going through the same thing. Why would you not talk about it to them? Because
Right.
embarrassment doesn't get you anywhere. Wanting to withhold that information does absolutely nothing beneficial for you. So it's just a matter of being an adult and stop being so stubborn. I mean, it literally comes down to that, and just be willing to open yourself up and saying, hey, I need help, or hey, here's where I am. You have any ideas on how we get out of here? And then when you have that partnership going, whether it's a good friend, a parent, a spouse, a sibling, it doesn't matter, it's still that emotional support, which we all need. I mean, humans are very psychological, physiological. We need that emotional bonding, plain and simple. So it does help.
It does. And yeah, I honestly, I don't even think I have an answer for that, because it can start off okay, and then it just kind of builds like building blocks, and then you gotta figure out where to stop building and start listening. So what would some small positive financial habits be that can boost morale? Sorry.
To boost morale, so debt stacking, there's some free tools online you can use and everything. And this is what I tell my clients. I'm like, guys, listen, I know this sucks to see it, but I try very much to always bring a positive spin and leave my clients feeling hopeful, because there's always hope. It doesn't matter. Like, I've literally worked with people that want to retire, at 67. And even if they're not there yet, I show them very quickly how it's possible to get there. So there's always hope regardless. Okay. So even though you
Right.
can't see it, somebody else can. So if you're in that dark place, seek help. But the positive habits to boost morale, take care of your debts, look at them, let them sink in, realize how much it sucks, but then figure out or ask for help on how to figure out when it's going to be paid off. And then in turn, instead of just taking that money and blowing it, you make it work for you. So what we do for our clients here is, once we get debts paid off, most of the time significantly sooner than what they would have been just paying minimums and stuff on their own, we now get to take some of that money that they have that's freed up. If they're paying $2,500 a month on debts, or even if we take, half of that, or even if we take an extra $1,000 a month and invest it in their own accounts, that is hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars over the course of time, and depending on how their investments are. So seeing that, and then seeing the future of where it's going to go, and having that exact step and direction, that's super, inspiring. And yes, it
Right.
takes time, but to see that, paying yourself first though, instead of, like I said, going out and buying just a bunch of frivolous stuff, you actually have an intentional budget to where you save up for a big trip. So if you put aside $200 a month specifically for a trip, know that that trip's coming, and then you go enjoy that trip stress free, worry free. You saved, you budgeted for it. Go enjoy. It's your money. Life is short. Have some fun, but do it responsibly. You can have fun here and now while still, being a responsible adult. But too many people, they take it one way or the other. That there is a middle ground, and it's just like plugging away in the small things. If you get your financial house built, so to speak, there's less stress, less worry, because you know what's coming in the future. And then so when you know that, you can always look back and kind of recenter yourself, if you will, ground yourself and be like, okay, I know it's stressful, but I know what's coming. And it's just a matter of like, all right, grin and bear through it, knowing the good things are still coming. And that's, again, depending on where people are. But those are some of the small steps you can have. I know they have stuff like Stash, the Stash app, that's a bank. And then they have like Chime, which I think is into it or something like that, but
I
it'll
think so.
the difference of what you spend. Now, being on my end, those things are terrible. They're not very great. But if you've never had that experience, you don't know how to invest, that still does build up. It's not going to help you retire. But if you're doing it for 4 or 5 years, you probably have a couple hundred, if not a couple thousand, in between various stocks that have been just taken and rounded up from that. Use that. Put it into a Roth IRA. Put it into a traditional. Go have a vacation, but do it responsibly.
Okay, good. Now, I got a question from a Miss Sarah. She asked, I'm overwhelmed by my credit card balances. Should I focus on debt payoff or building savings? Both.
Yep. So again, this is what we do, but we go through and try to figure out where we can help free up as much money as possible with all our clients. So I would always, tell people to shop around for your auto insurance, homeowners insurance, small business insurance, renters insurance. There's so many companies out there. Make them fight for your business. Don't go to the sketchy sites, but go to like legit ones and everything. But your main ones are like Allstate, Geico, Progressive, Farmers, General, whatever else. Make them fight for your business. See if you can get lower rates, because even if you free up your auto insurance by $30 a month, well, guess what? Take that, put $30 a month towards your debts, or $30 a month towards your emergency fund. Split the difference, do 25 and then 10 or something like that. But those small baby steps, they still compound over time. So even though it doesn't feel like it's making a whole big dent now, it's the same thing. It's compound interest. It's the longer term outlook, and it will grow because that's the way math works. You just have to stick with it, the consistency. But with that, depending on, there are sources out there, you can absolutely call your institution and tell them, be like, hey, I'm struggling. I will not be able to make this payment if it is what it is. Can y'all lower the interest rate? Okay, so you can absolutely ask that. Do they have to give that to you? No, but it's worth a call and ask. The worst thing they're going to do is tell you no. It's not like they can't raise it like that just easily, because there are limits to how much they can raise it. But call. It's free to you. It could save you literally thousands of dollars on interest over the course of a short period of time. You have to prioritize, paying yourself first. If you're in debt, that's not going anywhere, especially with student loans. Student loans, to me, are one of the most evil financial products, thanks to our politicians. Go figure. But they actually made it to where you can't get rid of them via bankruptcy or anything else. They're stuck with you until you die. Here's something too, which doesn't quite go to your question, but something most people aren't aware of, is that debts debts are not an obligation to your heirs unless they sign paperwork. So if you have a parent, grandparent, something like that has passed away, and these creditors are trying to call and collect on you, you are not obligated unless your name is on that. Now, however, because they are very sketchy companies and crummy and everything, if you give any indication that you are willing, they will take that as a verbal commitment of you paying that debt. So you always ask, or you always say these two things. If they ever call and ask for those debts or you'd pay off, say, no, I don't, prove it, and then hang up. That's it. If they can't prove it, you are not legally obligated. Don't worry about it. They might try to harass you, threaten them, be like, hey, I'm going to stick a lawyer on you. Stop this harassment. Prove it. I already told you that. But yeah, it's just a matter of paying yourself first. You have to be disciplined, otherwise it will drown you. And then if you write it off, then affects your credit score. It can stay on your credit report for a number of years. Bankruptcy is a good option sometimes, but there are better ways out there. It's kind of a last resort thing. Yeah, it's doing the best with what you have when you can, and then seeking help with where you don't know it.
Okay. I know you've mentioned this a few times, but I got another question. What free resources can get me started? I would say you would be the first one. I don't know who else after that.
Yeah, unfortunately, not many companies do what I do. So we do everything free because we're independent. So we actually get paid by the companies we work with, which allows us to operate without any conflicts of interest or anything, but within all areas of finance, which is really nice. Now, sadly, I'm one of a very few companies that I know of that do that. But free resources that I use, NerdWallet's really good. I- Investopedia is kind of a little bigger, little more going into depth on like investment, stock market, things like that. But they do still write really good articles, how to understand things, how to plan for stuff, portfolios. There's a couple Reddit threads that are okay, but again, they're opinions from people that they're anonymous. So do with that what you will, but FIRE and Fat Fire. So financial independence, retirement, whatever it was. It's how to retire based on certain things. Unfortunately, there's so much information out there that there's not really any good, easy one-stop shop places for it. It's The financial industry is so big, so global, and there's so much and so many moving parts out there that it really is hard to learn, because you don't know what's what. You don't know the questions to ask, or how to plan for stuff, or even how to ask the right questions in order to get to the questions you want to ask. Yeah, unfortunately, there's not really a good answer for that one. I'm sorry.
Okay. Try not to catch you off guard too much.
I mean, that's a great question, But
Yeah.
I've been looking for it, and that's what I try. So like on my website, I try to have the good resources that are very, intentional and pointed, but there's very few and far between for just like a one-stop shop.
Would you be willing, or are you interested in sharing your email, so if people do have questions that they can email you?
Yeah. Yeah, all my information's public. I have my phone number listed. You can, shoot me a message. I'm on pretty much all the social medias trying to teach constantly. Email, my business is public. Our licenses are public. Like email me, shoot me a text, call me, whatever you want. So we're here. This is what I do all the time. And I love doing it and helping people. But like I said, there's simply not enough of us in the world to help everyone, but we're trying. We're trying. Doing the best we can.
Well, Justin, I really want to say thank you for your insight, your tools, and actionables in giving everybody a hopeful sense of balance. But as we close, what's one financial final positive thought you would like to leave our listeners with?
Hmm. Don't pay your taxes legally. So, the question, do you like paying taxes? Of which hopefully everyone says no. I mean, taxes are, needed and necessary, but when you cannot pay your taxes legally, take advantage of that. A Roth IRA, the large majority of people out there in the United States qualify for a Roth IRA. Open a Roth IRA. It is tax-free retirement. So it has to be with the income that you make. Okay, so qualified income, but you can't use like VA money and everything, unfortunately. So it does have to come from a job. But as long as you qualify, all of that, the IRS and Congress literally says, hey, we're going to tax you on the money now. So that like you get your money in from your job and it's already been taxed, and then you put that money away into a Roth, and then you let that grow, and then you don't have the required distributions you have to take as if it were in like a 401k or traditional annuity pension, anything like that, because you've already paid taxes up front. So over time, as long as you're doing it right, that money's going to grow into hundreds of thousands and more, and you won't owe taxes on that because you already paid taxes up front. Whereas the traditional 401k pension, they're the opposite. You don't pay taxes up front, and you get a small little tax benefit from it here and now, but then the IRS says, okay, well, it's been growing tax free 30 years, time to pay up. So come on. And now you're in a higher tax bracket, which does affect, your Medicare, Social Security, disability income, all that stuff that people don't think about. So if
Right.
you plan that one very specifically, you're going to be in a higher tax bracket and actually possibly worse than where you were before.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I really much appreciate all that. And listening, pick what you have heard from Justin. I would like for you to pick just one tool and share or schedule your money first date and give it a try just this week. Remember, money worries ever becoming overwhelming. You can always text 988. Veterans can push 1. Everybody else just stay on the line. If you have questions or you want to see how to get a hold of Justin, you can email me at htfwmidwest@gmail.com for more resources. And like I said, I will help you out, get you in contact with Justin. You just got to send me your information. I will send it to him and pass that along. I am Joey, and I want to say thank you, Mr. Justin, for coming on. And always, I will have your 6, both in life, maybe not in your finances, but I'll try and be there. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Healing Connection.
Thanks, Joey.